Nothing lifts your spirits like the first day of spring. My name is Stefano, and I am starting my adult life all over again. I thundered my wheeled suitcase down the jet bridge and wheeled it into the less crowded than usual airport concourse. It's only been a year since the international economy collapsed. Last spring was simply terrible for me. I lost my job, Lynn left me, and then, just weeks apart, my grandparents died. To top it all off, my dwindling finances could no longer afford me to keep my home. Starting a new life with a new job in another city was what I needed. I was lucky that I was hired for this job when many of my friends were still in unsuccessful searches. My new company paid for my accommodation for 2 weeks, after which I was on my own. After meeting my new colleagues, I later had to fill out a folder with a bunch of applications from the HR department. Once all the papers were signed, I walked back to the hotel and plopped down on my bed. Not many people stayed at this small hotel, and the staff went out of their way to make me feel welcome. I strongly suspect that for them, too, this year turned out to be the most difficult in their lives. 2 weeks flew by. It was so nice to feel needed again. I found myself a cozy apartment located just 2 miles from my office. On fine days, of which there seemed to be more than 300 a year, I happily walked to and from work. After coming here from a colder climate, the bright sunshine and gentle blows of the warm breeze were a very pleasant change for me. Taking with me only a bag of groceries and a rolling suitcase that followed me from the plane, I checked out of the hotel and moved to my new habitat. It's good that I didn't own my own car, since there were no free parking spaces in the area anyway. Even the sides of the streets around my apartment building were jammed with cars. Savings forced people to double or even triple the occupancy of their apartments. In these times of crisis, 6 or even 10 people living in a 2-bedroom apartment was not unusual. So, alone in my cramped 2-bedroom apartment, I felt like a real king. For reasons that I could not explain to myself, it was as if I was drawn by a magnet to this particular apartment. Perhaps it was the wonderful view from my bedroom window of the nearby pond and the densely wooded park surrounding it. On the 4th floor and without a balcony, I felt safe leaving my bedroom window open. There was no screen in the window itself, which I indicated in my detailed inspection report to the manager before I moved into the apartment. Coming from a colder climate, I still could not get used to constant air conditioning, so I hardly used the available air conditioning. This 4-story building was probably built about 50 years ago. By the way, there weren't enough sockets in the rooms, but I made do with extension cords. When I returned home on the first Friday of work at a new place, I found a bird sitting on the refrigerator in my apartment. A real live bird, about 13 centimeters tall. She had an almost completely yellow body, black wings, and the same black feathering on the front of her head. As I came closer, the bird took off, flew across the room, and grabbed the edge of the curtain rod with its small claws, tilting its head and looking at me with its sparkling, beady eyes. After several more equally unsuccessful attempts, I gave up pursuing her. Well, great. If I have to share living space, this bird would probably be a good choice for a roommate. As a gesture of reconciliation, I poured and placed a small saucer of water on the kitchen table. Once I was no longer perceived as a threat, the yellow and black bird came unstuck from the cornice and then, rustling with its wings, swooped onto the table and treated itself to fresh water. Having opened my laptop and briefly surfed the internet, I tentatively determined that my new feathered friend and roommate was the American goldfinch. The only difference between the photo on the internet and the goldfinch pacing my desk was that the live bird had a noticeable small black crest about half an inch below the beak. Just right, I thought. I'll call her Goldie. By the way, was it he or she? With such evasive maneuverability, which Goldie had already demonstrated, I, of course, did not have a chance to look where I should and carefully examine who had come to me. Well, to hell with it. The name Goldie fits either way, but, despite everything, this bird is for me, she. Good thing I still didn't have a roommate. I suddenly found myself talking to Goldie while I was going about my business. If I accidentally got too close, Goldie fluttered to a safe corner. When I woke up the next morning, Goldie had disappeared. I left the window open just in case and went for a run. When I returned, Goldie was already waiting for me. Well, if she was going to stay, I might as well take a look at what should or shouldn't be included in her daily diet. I'm going back to the internet. Yeah, right. And then head to the pet store. From what I've read, Goldie should like sunflower, thistle, and elm seeds. I'll have to kiss my wasted money goodbye if Goldie isn't there when I get back. Hooray! Not only was she waiting for me at home, but thank God she loved the seeds I bought from the store. What about loving me? This remained to be seen. So far, Goldie has always kept a safe distance from me. On Sunday morning, not yet fully awakened from my half-sleep, it seemed to me that someone was looking at me. When I opened my eyes, I found Goldie just a few feet away on the bedside table, looking at me intently with one eye or the other. Without making a sound, we stared at each other. Why? I don't even know. When I got tired of the staring contest and closed my eyelids, Goldie immediately chirped angrily, which made me open my eyes again. Apparently, this was her way of training me, because all we did was stare at each other again. 30 seconds later, Goldie chirped something and stormed out of the bedroom. It was time to get up. I showered, shaved and dressed lightly. Goldie was nowhere to be seen. Her seed dish was empty, so I put out another small spoon for her. I also refreshed her water before leaving the apartment. While on my morning run, I noticed and heard several American goldfinches fluttering and chirping around among the trees. Of course, I wondered if one of these yellow and black birds was my Goldie. Taking a springy step and gradually cooling down, I became acquainted with some of my housemates, including several curious women. 3 of them were ladies about my age, and their names were Nancy, Laura, and Josie. The new neighbor, who was also passionate about keeping fit and healthy, apparently piqued their interest. We didn't get to the point of exchanging phone numbers, but at the next meeting, I would throw a fishing rod into this promising pond. Day after day passed, and little by little Goldie accepted me. It was 2 weeks after we met when she first dared to land on my head. At that moment, I was busy sitting at my laptop and answering emails. My new job was quite stressful, and I didn't have time to even think about my social life. Goldie sat on my head until I started squirming too much, and then she took off and landed on her favorite curtain rod. Many mornings I woke up to find Goldie with her head cocked to the side, silently watching me from the bedside table. One day I fake-tweeted at her and she chirped something back at me. God, I hope I didn't say something indecent in dandy language to Goldie. During my runs around the pond and through the park, I sometimes heard a familiar chirping sound, but it could have been any of the birds scurrying here and there. Thanks to my morning runs, I was also able to keep in touch with the ladies in my neighborhood. I ended up exchanging email addresses and phone numbers with some of them. Laura was a very shy young lady who blushed every time I so much as looked in her direction. Over casual conversations, Nancy and Josie told me more about themselves and their lives, but, unlike them, Laura kept personal information secret. 6 weeks into my new life, I had a date with one of the ladies I met in the food court next to the office. She worked at the bank branch next door. Donna haunted me even more than I haunted her. However, this was my first date since moving. I stuttered and stammered as I tried to carry on a conversation with her, although she didn't seem too mindful of my embarrassment. Donna was a sweet girl, but too persistent, clearly trying to get into her wedding dress as quickly as possible, and that wasn't what I was interested in right now. When I walked into the apartment after the date, Goldie chirped indignantly at me as if I had missed my curfew. I tweeted back at her. During my regular weekend run, I ran into the neighborhood ladies again. One of Laura's older friends gave me this shy girl's phone number. If women's gazes could make one fall backwards, then all that would remain of this friend Laura would be a contour on the ground, outlined in chalk. Laura herself blushed desperately when I immediately dialed the number given to me. Her phone had a distinctive ringtone that I recognized as a Taylor Swift song. A few more weeks later, I had a date with Chrissy. She worked in the back office of a broker-age firm located on the ground floor of my office building. I met her in the hall while we were both waiting inside for a brief downpour. Even though I didn't think the date was going well, Chrissy insisted on coming over and seeing my apartment. When we walked in, Goldie was sitting on her favorite curtain rod and just watching us. Chrissy didn't stay with me long. I was under the impression that she was a material girl and that I had failed an unspoken test. Something about the fact that a lonely guy had wild birds living uncontrollably in his apartment scared her away. Less than 5 seconds after Chrissy left, Goldie, who had been silent all this time, began to express her chirping complaints to me. "I'm sorry, Goldie, I know it's my fault." I hastened to repent, raising my hands. "I see your food plate is empty. I promise that I won't let this happen again." But in response, indignant tweet, chirp, chirp continued to fall from the cornice onto my poor head. I was openly scolded, and I only hoped that the girl Goldie had time to learn a few obscene expressions for young dandies. At the end of each of her angry roulades, she fluttered her tail feathers as if putting an exclamation mark. In the morning, rubbing the sleep from my eyes, I felt a small, sticky spot on my forehead. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw that it was bird shit. "Goldie, what the fuck?" I shouted at my feathered neighbor in my living space. "Teep, tweet, tweet!" The saboteur did not remain in debt, cracking her tail in my direction from the safe ledge. I said, "I'm sorry. This won't happen again," I promised conciliatorily. Goldie raised her beak, turned away, and jumped on her ledge, pointedly not paying attention to me. She made no secret of the fact that she was quite unhappy with me, and I wondered if she would still be here when I returned from work. Just in case, I made sure to leave a full plate of seeds and a saucer of fresh water for the wayward beauty. As time passed, things returned to normal for Goldie and me. She waited in the morning for me to wake up and only occasionally chirped at me. Even though I only started my new job a few months ago, I have already trained some new employees. This, of course, left me little time to do my own work, so at home I sometimes stayed late doing it. While I was making ends meet in my reports, Goldie was not shy about flying off her favorite curtain rod and sitting on my head. From time to time, I ran into the neighbors' ladies who increasingly began to ask why I hadn't called any of them back. Hearing my explanation that I was swamped with work and had almost no time for dates, Lively Josie took the initiative into her own hands and asked me out on a date herself. Josie became the third woman I went out with in my new place of residence. It happened on a Friday night, and we first had dinner and then went dancing. To be honest, I dance in such a way that, compared to me, even a club-footed bear would take a prize. However, Josie didn't seem to mind my clumsiness at all. She even turned down several unsolicited invitations to dance from other, much smarter guys. This made me very happy. However, all I got from Josie at the end of that evening was a handshake and a "thanks, it was fun." When I returned home from the date, Goldie greeted me quite calmly. I don't think she even tweeted at me disapprovingly once that weekend. Apparently, I hadn't crossed some invisible red line, so she was pleased with my behavior. That all changed the following Friday night when Josie and I went on our second date. This time, the program included a great dinner and a subsequent trip to the cinema. In my opinion, everything went very well. At least before she walked into her apartment, Josie gave me a hug and a peck on the cheek, thanking me for a great evening. When I returned to my apartment, I was greeted by a loud and angry riot on the ship. I didn't feel any guilt because before leaving I left Goldie with fresh water and a bowl full of seeds. "Well, what's eating you? Maybe another bully goldfinch is hitting on you. Cheer fuit chirick chirk chirick." "Oh, never mind. I'm going to bed. I'd be damned if I didn't find a bird poop bomb in my hair this morning." However, I did not say a word to the night terrorist. Goldie was already waiting for me on the kitchen table. I showed up for the showdown, as if yesterday I had come home late and drunk, and now this vixen needed a reasonable explanation for my carelessness. She was boring me with her round eyes, tilting her head. I wish she had rested her wings on her sides. "Teep!" she barked and swished her tail a couple of times. "Tweet yourself, you little asshole! I fed you yesterday." So what ruffles your feathers again? More furious tail pirouettes, rrr, and then an unprintable chirick, before she flew off the table, rushed into the bedroom, and flew out into the wild. Well, I hope I learned my lesson well. Whatever lesson I should have learned. Much to my surprise, Laura and Nancy joined me on my traditional weekend run. We talked about how things are going with work for me and each of the ladies. They both made it clear that they would love to have dinner and a movie like we had with Josie. Sounds tempting. Let me check if I wrote down your numbers correctly. I winked at my companions. First, I found Nancy's number in my contacts and immediately called it. "Is this Nancy?" I asked. "Yes, sir. How can I help you?" "Well, ma'am, I'd like to take you on a date on Friday night. Come pick me up at 6, she giggled and stuck out the tip of her tongue to Laura standing next to her. I then called Laura, whose ringtone changed to One Magical Evening. The girl answered simply, "Hello?" twirling a curl of hair on the finger of your free hand. "Can I have Laura?" "Who is asking her?" "This is Stefano. I can call you back if it's not a good time." "Wait a second, I'll call her." Both girls giggled, turning slightly to the side and giving me mischievous glances as I waited. "This is Laura," the receiver finally answered in a laughing voice. "Hello, Laura. My name is Stefano. I've asked you out every day for the past 6 weeks, and this time I won't take no for an answer from you," I announced sternly and decisively. Shocked, Nancy immediately peeled herself away from Laura and squealed, "What? He invited you to date?" Laura immediately blushed and shook her head desperately. "No, he didn't invite me. This is the first time." Hastily pressing the end button, Laura attacked me. "Nancy got Friday, so I got Saturday. Do you understand everything, Mr. Stefano?" "Yes, ma'am. Saturday. This Saturday. At 6, like a bayonet." "No excuses," I reported solemnly, clicking the missing heels of my sneakers. Breaking into a smile and standing on tiptoe, Laura kissed me on the cheek, just the way Lynn always did it. Nancy followed her friend, giving me a sensual kiss on the other cheek. Friday night with Nancy was interesting. She turned out to be a very assertive lady and was not shy about asking personal questions. Being a somewhat reserved person by nature, I felt out of place answering most of them. Trying to get me to relax, Nancy seized the moment, turned my head with her hands, and gave me a juicy, wet kiss with tongue penetration. I won't lie and say I didn't enjoy it, but things moved a little too quickly for me to feel comfortable enough. The hug at the end of the evening was accompanied by Nancy's firm embrace and erotic groping of my ass. After so many months of abstinence, I responded, but I wish I hadn't. Encouraged, Nancy again invited me to go out on Sunday evening, but this time I lied to her, saying that I had an online conference scheduled for the day after tomorrow, and after that, I would need to write a detailed report for management. In order not to appear like a complete ass in Nancy's eyes, I suggested that we go on another date in a week, next Friday. Upon returning to the home nest, Goldie, without wasting any time, began to hover around me, anxiously flying back and forth and chirping some apparently valuable instructions directly into my ears. If I were in a deep mine, I would definitely be worried. A sunny and joyful Saturday morning found me wiping a new portion of bird crap from my head. "Goldie, what's wrong with you?" I screamed. "Rot! Tweet your tail! Stop this terrorism now or I will take your seeds away. Hop, hop, whew! Tweet, tweet, tweet!" And then shoots out like an arrow from the bedroom window. I don't know if this was the last smart warning to leave her seeds alone and keep your dirty human paws to yourself, but I didn't want to risk anything. I had to take care again to leave a full plate of seeds and a saucer of fresh water. I still have to live with this mad, black-tailed marquise. As awkward as Friday night with Nancy was, Saturday night with Laura was amazing. I felt completely at ease with her. At first, she was clearly embarrassed and kept some distance between us. By the end of the evening, she not only held my hand, but, one might say, squeezed it passionately. A sweet kiss on the cheek and a gentle hug from Laura ended our first evening together. At the same time, my heart was beating wildly, and I really didn't want to part with this wonderful girl. When I returned home, Goldie was sitting calmly on the kitchen table, busily pecking at her sunflower seeds and washing them down with water. Not a single abusive tweet addressed to me, which is even surprising. That evening, not a single word was spoken between us. Already lying in bed and unable to sleep, I could not stand it, and sent Laura a message inviting me to meet again next Saturday. The answer came almost instantly. She replied, "Yes," and added a heart-eyed emoji. Apparently, Laura couldn't sleep that night either. Sunday morning, I woke up to Goldie sitting on my bedside table. Instead of calmly staring at me as usual, Goldie chirped quietly a few times and then went free. The conditioner in the form of liquid bird droppings was not found in my hair this time. So-so. My Friday date with Nancy didn't go too well. I decided to leave, deliberately entering into a political argument with her. Even though I actually agreed with her, I used this little disagreement as a good opportunity to end our relationship. Upon returning home, Goldie didn't say anything to me at first, until I climbed into bed, and then she swooped down on the bedside table and spent the next 10 minutes explaining something to me with her instructive chirping. When I found 2 blobs of bird droppings in my hair on Saturday morning, I wasn't even surprised. "Goldie, is that your bird shit thing again?" "You won't get any seeds today." And that's it. Zero reaction. While I walked around the apartment, Goldie carefully watched me from above, without making a sound. Perhaps she had laryngitis from the fact that she had been tweeting something into my brain for so long and persistently the night before. Saturday night with Laura left me with my heart pounding again. This so reminded me a lot of my early dates with Lynn, when I couldn't wait to hear her sweet voice again. When I got back from the date, Goldie still hadn't gotten her chirping back and had a poop shortage. On Sunday, I woke up to a quiet bird looking at me from the bedside table. "Well, are you finally happy now?" I muttered. "Gee, Rick." "Fine. I think I'll ask Laura out again." "Rot, limit. Uh-huh. Well, I'm glad you agree." I stretched my lips, dry from sleep, into a kind of smile, and closed my eyes again. My dates with Laura moved forward and began to develop into intense petting sessions. Even though I returned home long after midnight, Goldie was still awake and was waiting for me every time, sometimes hanging from the curtain rod, and sometimes jumping and pacing on the kitchen table. It seems she taught me well enough that I remembered to leave her a daily portion of seeds and fresh water before leaving. When Laura first came to my house, Goldie was hidden and sitting quietly on the curtain rod. I warned both girls, Goldie and Laura, that they were about to meet each other. Laura thought I was joking, but quickly recovered from the shock when she saw Goldie staring at her. While I prepared dinner, heating it in the microwave, Laura looked around, studying the feng shui principles of my bachelor pad. She sorted through trinkets, then rummaged through books, and finally, her attention was captured by a lonely picture standing on my mantelpiece. "Who is this beautiful woman?" she asked, holding it up in front of her and peering at the framed photograph. "This is Lynn, a very special woman to me," I said quietly. "She was a nurse and died of a virus last year. It still pains me to talk about this." Carefully putting the photograph back in place, Laura remarked, "It says, 'Always and forever, Goldie.' So that's why you named your little bird Goldie?" "Yes." My voice broke as a spasm tightened in my throat, and tears blurred my vision. Laura came up behind me and hugged me without saying a word. It took me a few minutes to come to my senses. Well, life goes on. Dinner led to a night of passion. For me, this was the first time this had happened since Lynn and I had last loved each other. After hugs and passionate kisses, our hands continued to roam freely, exploring our new partner. Although I was completely ready to move on to flexible and active exercises, I was still in no rush. Deseating every accessible naked part of the body, I achieved that state of Laura when she, taut like a string, was trembling all over with impatience. And then we threw ourselves into the pool of pleasure, giving ourselves to each other with all our ardent passion. Fortunately, I was able to last longer than her, so our first intimacy ended only after Laura violently shook the bed, writhing and experiencing her highest pleasure. Soon after that, I followed her. As usually happens at first meetings, having calmed down a little, we pressed ourselves against each other and almost in unison admitted that everything was wonderful. And I absolutely did not lie. This long night was truly wonderful, containing not only 2 nightly fireworks of love, but also another one that happened just before dawn. And in the morning I woke up hearing Laura's joyful voice. "Good morning, Goldie." Instead of the loud chirping usually directed at me, Goldie whispered chirp, chirp, chirp before fluttering her wings and flying out into the wild. I had almost no doubt that I would see bird shit in my hair, but amazing thing, he was absent. Perhaps my threat to take away her favorite seeds from the air pirate worked. "Good morning to you too, lover." This time the smiling Laura addressed me. "Ready for another round?" Having taken a shower after morning exercise in bed and gotten dressed, I found Laura in the kitchen by the aroma where she was making coffee. "News this morning. Treacherous Goldie has turned her back on me. You see, I fed her for months, and during all this time she never sat on my hand." Laura put a few seeds in her palm, raised her hand a few inches, and Goldie immediately flew off the ledge and landed softly on her outstretched hand. "Goldie! Oh, you traitor! I've tried this dozens of times to no avail. You are a shameless defector," I exclaimed, struck to the core by the female bird's double-dealing. Giggling, Laura squeezed a sunflower seed between her lips and tilted her head to the side and down, slightly stretching her lips forward, and then Goldie jumped up and snatched the seed, as if kissing Laura. "Well, well, I can't believe it. Hey, you two, did you conspire on purpose or what?" "Goldie has very high standards, which you obviously don't meet," declared a beaming, happy Laura. After that, Goldie and Laura, tweeting and laughing, teased me for a long time with their amorous antics. I didn't want the situation to get out of control, but at the same time, I didn't want to lose Laura. 3 months into our relationship, I proposed to her. Laura responded with only one condition. "If you agree to start a family immediately after the wedding, then I accept your offer." We sealed our verbal agreement with a hot kiss. Well, actually, it was not just a kiss, but something much more. Okay, I admit, we had a wild night of passionate love, so much so that I even had to take the morning off to recover. Emma, life is good again. In the morning, Goldie chirped something clearly approving of our nightly fun and flew off to her bird affairs. Taking the photograph from the fireplace in her hands, Laura sternly demanded, "It's time to tell me a story. If we are going to get married, then we should not have secrets from each other. I wasn't sure I could handle it. Give it to me here. Let's hug while I tell you a story." Laura settled comfortably, pressed against me, and tucked her legs under her slender ass. "Lynn and I met in college," I began the story. "Until I met you, I firmly believed that she was my soulmate. I proposed to her on Christmas Day, and we set a wedding date for June." Laura put her hand behind my back, hugged me, and pressed me even tighter. "Lynn. She went to nursing school and was allowed to take her exams early so she could help patients in hospitals." I paused because my throat was seized with a spasm, and now I could only barely squeeze out the words. Laura ran her hand over her face, quickly wiping away the moisture from her eyes with the back of her hand, but the tears quickly appeared again. Having controlled myself, I continued. "Lynn had asthma, which proved fatal when she contracted the virus. She tested positive, and this happened before thousands of people died. Lynn had no idea anything was wrong. As hard as they tried to stay safe, several other healthcare workers in the red zone near her also fell ill. Since we weren't married yet, I couldn't see Lynn all the time and monitor her condition. Lynn's parents were stuck on a cruise ship and also had no way to monitor her health. It was only when I saw her name on the list of deceased health workers that I had confirmation, and only a few months later, Lynn's parents found her grave. Now it was my turn to join Laura, wiping away the tears running down my face. Because of her light golden hair, I lovingly called her Goldie. Do you see that there is a noticeable birthmark on her neck? Lynn was always very shy about him, and I told her that it was something like a place marked with an X, to make it easier for vampires to bite her. She laughed at me, and I didn't think anything of it, so Lynn stopped trying to hide the spot with makeup and started showing it off. Goldie rustled through the air past us and landed on the kitchen table. Laura followed her flight and took a deep breath. "Your little feathered friend seems to have a birthmark, too. Look, look! That little black dot is under her beak." "Yeah, that's why it was very easy for me to call her Goldie." I nodded, hugging Laura's shoulders. We sat quietly and watched as Goldie pecked at her seeds, raising her head from time to time and looking at us with her black, beady eyes. When she finished eating, she chirped something to us before fluttering up and settling in her favorite place on the curtain rod. In the park, which is located opposite our residential complex, there is a beautiful gazebo pavilion. Laura and I decided to save some money and have our wedding ceremony there. When everything was arranged and everyone was ready, Laura's father led his daughter to the altar. As he passed her hand to me, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a yellow bird approaching. Sure enough, it was Goldie, landing softly on the back of one of the empty chairs. There were chuckles and giggles from the crowd that had gathered behind us. Laura instinctively turned around to see who or what was disturbing her most important ceremony in her life. When Laura looked at me with questioning curiosity, I whispered, "This is Goldie," and pointed to the side with his eyes at our motley friend sitting importantly on a chair. Seeing her, Laura smiled radiantly, and my bride's eyes moistened. Goldie remained in her place until I finished the traditional kiss of the bride, which was received with loud approval by all those gathered, and only then did she fly away. When I pulled away from Laura and glanced at the rows of chairs, our yellow-breasted guest was no longer there. Goldie's mission was completed. At the reception that followed the ceremony, several people showed us photographs and videos they had taken of a yellow bird that intervened and bombed up our wedding with its presence. Laura stopped taking birth control immediately after our wedding, but a few weeks after our honeymoon, she was still getting her period. Of course, we both tried our best in bed, but I didn't make a fuss about our lack of luck so far. Goldie and Laura remained best friends, and I was Mr. Outsider in their well-coordinated company. Okay, but I took a lot of cute pictures with both of them. After Laura started her fertile cycle again, we did this every night, and every morning Goldie was there to greet us, until the day she suddenly disappeared. This happened after one night that seemed really special for Laura and me. The next morning, precisely after that night, we did not hear Goldie's long familiar chirping. Deep down in my soul, I knew that this day would come sooner or later, but still I felt some kind of devastation in my soul, as if I had lost a close, kindred soul. I didn't say anything that first day when Goldie didn't show up, and Laura didn't know what to say either. When a week passed without Goldie, I went into the forest and cried. For the second time in the last 2 years, tears rolled down my cheeks, and I had to whisper, "Goodbye," looking up at the swaying treetops and fluttering leaves, not being able to personally say goodbye to the one who was so dear to me. Laura grieved in her own way. We hardly talked to her about Goldie, but we were both very hurt and sad. We just sat and hugged silently. There are 2 words that a young guy is afraid to hear, but this time everything was different. A few weeks after Goldie left us, Laura warned, "I've missed a period." My gloomy mood quickly changed, fueled by a kindled hope. "Is it true? Do you think you might be pregnant?" "Tomorrow I'm going to buy a pregnancy test kit, and then we'll see," Laura promised, without hiding her own hope and impatience. The next morning, at 10:30, I received a message. "Call me, immediately." My stomach clenched nervously. God, please let it be something good. "Stefano, you will become a dad!" The jubilant voice of my young wife was heard in the receiver, and her laughter through her tears. "Hooray! We will become parents very soon, in just a few months." Boy, did we have so much fun celebrating this amazing news. Every time Laura started having morning sickness, it was a real worry for me. I love her too much, and deep down I knew that if anything happened to her, it would kill me. But thank God, everything seemed to be going as it should for a young wife. We attended every doctor's appointment together, and looked at all the pictures of our unborn child. Tests showed that we are expecting the birth of a girl. We chose the names we wanted for the newborn and wrote them down. Laura wanted her choice to remain a secret until the birth was successful. It's hard to explain how slowly time passed for both of us. I was definitely on a constant edge. Having already experienced enough grief and heartache to last a lifetime, I wasn't sure I could handle more suffering if things went wrong. When Laura's water broke one day, I panicked at first. However, I managed to overcome my momentary confusion, quickly pull myself together, and successfully deliver Laura to the hospital. Natural childbirth was a difficult experience for me. Laura was exhausted, struggling with excruciating pain, and all I could do about it was to let her cling to my hand and morally encourage her young wife. Then a miracle happened. Our long-awaited baby was born. The staff took about a minute to examine her and confirm that we had a healthy little girl. The maternity ward nurse noticed this first, exclaiming, "Oh my God! Just look at her hair! Your girl is a natural blonde!" Apparently trying to reassure us, the attending physician who was observing the birth process added, "We can easily remove this birthmark from her neck." Laura, who had already put the baby to her breast and was watching her smack with a motherly smile of tenderness, beamed, raising her sparkling eyes to me, and then spoke. "Do you realize that it's been exactly 40 weeks since we last saw Goldie? Stefano, I want to name our little girl Goldie Lynn." Without any argument from me, our blonde bundle of joy was christened Goldie Lynn. Goldie Lynn still has a birthmark on her neck, and her favorite stuffed toy is an American goldfinch. Young mother Laura used a black marker to draw a birthmark on a soft toy, exactly the same as the one that graced our procuress, feathered Goldie. We still live in my apartment on the 4th floor, and I still leave the window overlooking the park open. From time to time, while going for a morning jog, I hear that familiar chirping sound among the tree branches. And even though I know that the chances are slim, I still raise my head and look up. I have to. Maybe today it's Goldie who greets me with her bubbly chirping. We have a lot of photographs hanging on our wall. Here are some photos of our little bundle of parenting joy. Many of them are of Goldie Lynn with Laura, but there are a few of me hugging some of my favorite women in life. And here is our mantelpiece. On the left is a framed photo of Lynn. Right next to her, a laughing Goldie Lynn takes a banana slice from a smiling Laura's lips. And a little further to the right is an image of Goldie, who, with her furry head bowed, examines the lens from her favorite curtain rod. And finally, a photo of the cunning Goldie snatching a seed from Laura's lips. And to the right of the photo frames, I left a saucerful of seeds on the fireplace. You'd probably have to be crazy to think that all these things are somehow connected. Well, you can consider me just that. A crazy romantic, I don't mind. Now, if you'll excuse me, there's a little girl with a mark on her neck grabbing my pant leg and wanting me to chase her again, pretending to be a vampire. When she runs away from me on her little legs, stomping funny and laughing loudly, it's very contagious. How wonderful it is that sooner or later, true happiness can be caught up, hugged tightly, and pressed directly to the heart. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.